Welcome again to a chat with the community, the Ministry of Education. Thank you for taking a time to be with us. We love to come to you, we love to speak with you, and to share all the things that are happening with us in the Ministry of Education. Last week we had a program where we looked at the hybrid/blended learning approach that we are endeavoring to go through since the COVID era. And you heard quite a lot last week from those persons who were here, someone from the primary school, someone from the secondary, and one person primary but private school. And indeed, I am sure you learned quite a lot. If you have any questions, you can still ask us, and we will be sure to clarify what is happening in the schools when it comes to hybrid learning and blended learning. I love to know that we are educating every child in this territory. My name is Connie George, and I'm the Acting Chief Education Officer in the Ministry of Education. This year we are looking at educating all in changing times as our theme for the year. And I'm sure with all that we can do, we are doing our best to make sure that every child is touched that live in this territory. Today I have with me, and we're going to be looking at the application process, registration in the Ministry of Education. We have started our application process, and that started in January 4th to be exact, and it's ongoing as we speak. So we just want to bring information to ensure that persons are clear, persons know our dates, persons understand exactly what they need to do and how it's going to be done. I want at this time to ask my panelists, my persons with me today, to introduce themselves. I have Ms. Jemai Evans with us. She is the person who is our desk officer for the registration. And I also have Ms. Genevieve McMaster, who is our early childhood education officer. I want to welcome you both to our chat with the community today.
Good afternoon, Mrs. George. Thank you.
To you, Mrs. George, and the viewing audience.
Thank you. We want to give you a much better understanding about our education system in trying to navigate in this period of change and the registration process that is ongoing as we speak. So we have with us Ms. McMaster and Ms. Jemai Evans, as I just said earlier, and I will want to ask them a series of questions as a way of guiding their thoughts in explaining, bringing clarity, and getting everyone to understand what is happening or what happens with our registration process. We have an admissions policy, and this is the premise on which we move forward when it comes to admissions and registration in schools. So, Ms. McMaster, I want to start with you today. I'm going to start with you. What is the age at which a child must legally be registered to begin school?
All right, so to answer that question, the child should be 4.5 when they start. So they would be 4.5 in September, so they would be 4 years old presently, and making 5 by February of next year, by the end of February next year, if they're looking at starting school come this September.
Okay, so you're saying basically the child should be 5 years old, but we accept them at 4.5 if they're coming to us in September.
Yes.
But basically we are saying 5 years old, the child should be, but we'll take 4-year-olds, 4.5-year-olds, making 5 February of the
By
upcoming.
next, yes.
All right.
Right.
So, Ms. McMaster, what challenges, if any, do parents have to, as it relates to this process?
All right. Well, for a number of parents, what they're finding is, remember we just said the end of February
Right.
is the cutoff date.
Mhm.
And so some parents come in and say, well, my child was born on the 1st of March or the 2nd of March, and so they're a couple days off. And so
Right.
they're asking if, consideration could be given to allowing them to bring their child, which would be considered an early entry.
Okay.
So that's one of the main problems or the
Okay.
main challenges that persons have had when it comes to that. The date is in for a particular reason,
Right.
in terms of, because remember we're talking about the development of
Development
children
of
and
children.
being ready for the level of education that we want to be able to provide and so forth. And so after much consideration and so forth, that was the date that was felt that is fairly workable in terms of children coming in.
Yes.
Okay? And so one of the things that we want persons to remember is that at the early years, development is quite rapid.
Right.
And so just a month off, 2 months off can make a difference
Major
in terms of
difference.
children's development, as well as what children's experiences are and those types of things and so forth. So every child is not necessarily at the same place.
Right.
So there are implications when it comes to the age,
Yes.
when we accept. So we've agreed that generally that age would work. However, if you do have a child that is that 1 day off, that 2 days off, and so forth, that you feel they are ready developmentally, you can contact the ministry
Right.
with that situation, and it would be dealt with on an individual basis.
Okay, so we want to establish clearly that once your child turns 5, they should be registered formally in school.
Yes, they must be.
Yes. And we also want to establish that once if the child is 4.5 in September and making 5 by February of the following year, they're also eligible for
For
registration.
registration.
Good.
Yes.
So you just mentioned the one challenge that we always have, and I found that to be a real challenge, I'll be honest with you, Ms. McMaster, is when the children are making 5 in March or the children are making 5 in April. You know, it's like, why can't they come? But very good that you clarified the developmental process could be significant just because it's a month or two later. And interestingly, I had this conversation with the principals just the other day, and they too bore out the fact that it is interesting to see that a child who is making 5 in April, many times they're not developmentally ready for kindergarten.
Yes, they do
And-
present some additional challenges to the
Okay.
class. Yes.
And actually, it was said that by the end of that school year, if we take them in, it's the time when they're actually now starting to get ready for formal education. Very good point. If they have a concern, let's reiterate this point. If they have a concern, my child is making 5 in March or in April, but you feel that your child is absolutely ready, I want to say that we do have a testing process, and the child will have to prove and to show that they're ready to move into kindergarten. Could you give us some information on that, Ms. McMaster?
All right. So, just before I get to that part of it, I wanted to add as well, because we have had a few situations as well with parents who felt that their child was not quite ready.
Right.
And so they wanted to hold them back.
Okay.
And so that as well is a process that we need parents to understand. You cannot just make the decision to keep the children out because you
Right.
don't think that they are ready. They are legally required to be in school, and so therefore it needs to come to the ministry. You would need to submit a letter of application stating your situation, explaining what your situation and circumstances are, what your concerns are, that you feel, for example, your child may be ready or your child is not ready, depending on which one it is, but it's the same process. And that goes to the chief education officer,
Yes.
where you would explain your situation. Accordingly, it would be submitted to the early childhood
Right,
unit
right.
for consideration as to what the recommendations would be.
Yes.
Where we would meet to schedule a meeting with the parents to have a further conversation as to try to understand where they're coming from.
Yes.
We would, of course, want to meet with the child, engage with them. And as you said, we do have, well, not necessarily a testing, but a screening process where we would engage the child with certain information and see how they engage with the information, as well as how they relate to
Right.
and interact with adults, which would be foreign to them in a sense because they wouldn't know us from before. So all of these are different things. So we have to look at the social development. We're looking at, and the questions and the engagement and so forth will be geared towards trying to figure out where the child is at with these things and
Yes.
are they actually ready for kindergarten.
Yes.
And then recommendation
Yes.
again would then go forward and the decision would be made.
Very good, very good. Thank you so much for all that detail. Another question is running in my mind, though. We have developed quite a vibrant daycare and preschool system, all privately owned. Would it be true to say that a child must be going to a preschool to be enrolled in public schools or in schools at 5?
They don't have to be.
Thank you.
It is not a mandatory requirement. And that is for different reasons, of course. But it is not a requirement. You do not have to. You could have had your child at home with you the whole entire 4.5,
Yes.
5 years. And you have been engaging with them, you have been interacting with them, and so forth and so forth. But the time has now come that they need to come to the formal
Yes.
schooling. So the preschool sort of helps to prepare children
Yes.
in that process. So some parents would have had their children home, but maybe a few months before the preschool, they would put them in a preschool just so that they could start getting used to being with other children
Yes,
and the socialization part of it and so forth. And so that has its benefit. The preschool program in itself is a 2-year program, however.
Yes.
And so, of course, there are differences that would come up in that as well, but it is not a requirement.
All right. Thank you so very much. And I wanted to make sure that that's clear that the kindergarten should begin at
Yes.
0. They should begin with the child as if they come into them with a clean slate.
Yes.
And that is so very important that people understand that. However, the preschools, as you said, is a good engagement for the children for
Yes.
several reasons.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
There are many benefits. Of
Yes.
course, there is the social, which
The
we talked
social,
about.
right.
Developing those social skills, learning some of the emotional regulation and
Yes.
so forth, and learning to communicate, and all of those types of things and so forth. Encouraging children and helping them to learn some of those different aspects.
Yes.
But the academic process that
Yes.
we're looking at and thinking about oftentimes really begins when they get to the kindergarten class. And so that teacher would be the one to really zero in on that and start that process for them.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Ms. McMaster and Ms. Evans. In addition to age, what are the other requirements for registration when you're bringing your children to formal education in the Virgin Islands?
So, Mrs. George, I'm glad that you asked this. I made sure walk with a list so I don't skip out anything.
Very
First, they
good.
would need a valid birth certificate. They would need an immunization card and an immunization letter that should be issued by the local clinic. They should also have with them a passport-size photo of the child as well as one for the parent or guardian. They should also have a passport or a belonger card. That's for the Virgin Islanders belongers. They should also have the health insurance, and if there are students or children from 1st grade through 12th grade, they should have an official transcript. In addition to this, for the non-belongers who are here in the territory, like from the preschool levels or other private schools
Yes,
that are
yes.
trying to go into the public school, they should also have that stamp in their passport that
Yes.
has the immigration approved time.
Yes.
For those who are coming from overseas who are non-belongers, the guardian or the parent should also be prepared to produce a job letter, a bank statement. They should also be ready to produce their last 2 current pay slips, as well as
Yes.
a written request to the Chief Immigration Officer asking for permission for these children to reside and attend school in the territory.
All right. So we have a marrying of the education and immigration when it comes to those children,
Yes.
which is very good, and I believe speed up the process a little bit,
Correct.
that you do not have to move from us, bring in one set of requirements, and to the other immigration another set of requirements, and the length of time for waiting is much longer. So as you shared all of that, let's go back a little bit, the regular registration. How long does this process take? And tell us how it works, actually. I just gave you a little preempt to that. But
Okay.
you could tell us exactly how it works and how long does it take.
Okay, so I just want to make mention again that the registration process started on January 4th, and we're going straight down to April 30th. Now, the registration process for the BV Islanders, Virgin Islanders, may take at least 1 week, whereas the applications for non-belongers may take a little longer. probably 3 to 4 weeks. Reason being is that it first comes to our department, it goes to immigration department for further processing,
Yes.
and then it is returned here for finalization.
Yes, yes, yes. If there are missing documents, what happens?
Should they not be able to satisfy the requirements,
Yes.
they will be notified, they will be told what documents are missing, and the application will be placed on hold until those requirements are satisfied.
Okay. So we are insisting and encouraging persons who are bringing students for admission to the system, whether public or private, to ensure that you have all the necessary documentations so that your process can be a smooth one. If you are not completed your application process, then we cannot do our part.
Correct.
We are making that clear to them, are we?
Correct.
All right, she's just saying correct, correct. All right, Ms. Evans, talk to us a little bit about the steps when a student is being transferred between schools.
Okay, so we have various different types of transfers. We have public to public. When this is happening, the principal of one public school would contact the other principal. They would fill out the necessary form with the guardian or the parent, and then they would forward that form to the Ministry of Education for processing.
Right.
Whereas if the students are transferring from outside of the territory to the Virgin Islands, or even from public to private or private to public, they would be required to fill out the same application form and submit all necessary documents, especially the produce the transcript that is
Yes.
important for class placement.
Okay, so the process is basically the same for private to public, public to private, transfer from outside the territory.
Correct.
And a slightly different process if the person is already in the public school
Yes.
system. And what we want to reiterate is the principal where the child is at currently
Yes.
should be the one making the first step to speak to the principal where the child is trying to go.
Yes.
So that means that there must be a conversation with the parent and the principal. I want
Yes.
to move my child to another school, and these are the reasons, and I would like to take the child to this school, and the school will then be contacted. Once there is placement, once there's space, what happens in that process? What happens at that time?
Once there is space, they fill out the necessary form. It is sent to the Ministry of Education, because now we have to make the adjustments in Power School to reflect that this child has moved from one school and is now in this school. So
Okay.
that principal now have access to all their records.
Okay, so you just mentioned Power School. What's Power School? I mean, you have to speak to the audience and let them know some of the things we do behind the scenes, and we are doing our level best to keep moving. And Power School is one of our student information system that we are using. So tell them a little bit about what you do
So
with Power
parents
School.
might be aware that the Power School they use for grade purposes to be able to view their children's grade. But what they don't also know or may not know is that
Yes.
the records follow the children on Power School. So when you get the application form and it asks you for medical information such as allergies, such as numbers, contact numbers, all of this is inputted into Power School, so the teachers, the principals have access to all this information
Right.
as needed.
Right, and it rolls with them.
Correct.
It will go with them when they move from primary school into secondary school. We won't have any need to give additional information. It will be rolled
Right.
over in Power School. You could explain that little process there too.
Unless the like for instance, our telephone number changes, we would update that. I'm glad that you mentioned secondary, because we have started registering our sixth graders who are entering into secondary school, whether private or public. They all are required at some point. We try to let them do it later on in the application process.
Yes.
So around April, they're all required to re-register with us so we could update the information
Yes.
as possible.
And that is so necessary. That is so necessary that we update information. and keep it current, because phone numbers could have changed, living areas may have
Yes.
changed. So many, a child is no longer living with ex-parent, they're living with Y-parent. So many things could have happened. So we want to be sure that the information that's moving into the secondary level is current. So what type of challenges do you face, though? Are there any challenges? This process sounds like it's so clearly laid out, it's so smooth. So let me know what challenges you face, Miss
The
Evans.
main challenge is having parents and guardians submit documents and applications on time. We have had applications come in as late as September, even October, when school is already in session.
Yes.
Help us to help you. You have to remember that principals are busy trying to get and prepare for students coming in. On a secondary level, they're probably trying to create schedules to suit your child's best needs, educational needs.
Right.
This takes time. And we don't want the parents or the guardians getting irate when we can't produce, like we can't give them a timely feedback. So help us to help you by submitting the documents on time,
Yes.
submitting the application on time, and we can give you a timely feedback to help the principals and other staff.
All right. So thank you so very much, Ms. Evans, for that. And we have spoken a lot about the whole registration process. We are looking at entering kindergarten and also entering grade 6, where the areas where we collect the information in the ministry. And that was a change that we made a few years ago to ensure that we are capturing all children in the territory and we know all the persons who are in the schools in the territory. So that is so very important. That is time we're going to take a little break and we will be back with you shortly.
Did you know if you engage in unauthorized visits with a person in quarantine, you will face a fine of $5,000? If you deliberately tamper and damage a geofencing device, you will face a fine of $2,000. If you do not return a wearable or tracking device, you will face a fine of $500. If you breach the protocols or guidelines as set out in the COVID-19 Control and Suppression Regulations 2020, you will face a fine of $10,000. Also, if you provide false information on an application for entry into the territory or to a designated public health or quarantine officer enforcing a quarantine order, you will face a fine of up to $5,000. Did you also know that public health officers under the Ministry of Health and Social Development can issue fixed penalty tickets? And persons can be arrested for failure to comply with a quarantine order under the COVID-19 Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Provision Act 2020. So, be sure to follow all health and safety protocols. Wear a mask or face shield when in public at all times. Sanitize, practice sneeze and cough etiquette, and practice social distancing. Remember, if you experience any symptoms related to COVID-19, including fever, cough, headache, fatigue, loss of taste or smell, sore throat, muscle aches, or difficulty breathing, contact the COVID-19 medical hotline at 852-7650 to be assessed by a health professional.
All right, thank you so very much for that ad, and I'm so happy that at our schools we are really practicing the safety protocols, and we want to be sure, parents, just reminding you, ensure that your child has a mask, face shield, a small bottle of hand sanitizer, and follow all the safety rules that we have at the schools. So thank you, ladies. We are back to continue our discussion. Ms. Evans, one thing we need to end this little section on, and we need to end by informing the listening audience where they can collect their registration forms for the new students or for the students going into grade 6. Where can they be accessed?
Okay, so the forms can be accessed on the government's website, that is bvigov.vg. If you look on the page, you'll be able to see a selection for government. You go there and you select Ministry of Education. On there, you will be able to select services, and there you will find the form. If for some reason you can't access it there, you can visit the Ministry of Education located in the awards building. That's the blue building next to the post office, and we will be happy to provide you with a form. You can also call us for further information at 468-2757.
All right. So there you have it. I will have Ms. Evans repeat that information at a later point in the program, just before we are concluding, so that we could remind you. And make haste. I want persons to begin now to think about registering their children for the upcoming school year 2021-2022. Can you imagine? 2021-2022. Let me turn my attention back to Ms. McMaster. Ms. McMaster, you mentioned that there are requirements to register when you're coming to our schools. What happens if a parent wants to keep the child at home and to do home study? So the homeschooling bit, let's speak a little bit to that.
Okay. Which fits in so well, as you said, our theme is educating all. And so we recognize that everybody has different requests when it comes to how they would like to have their child educated. And so, yes, there is legislation that speaks to being able to homeschool. However, what we need parents to also understand, it's a process.
Yes.
We are responsible for ensuring that we know where our children are within the territory. So as we said, between that 5 and 17 years, we need to know if you're in school, what school where you're in school, and that you're being adequately provided for
Yes.
in terms of your educational development and so forth. And so you can do that. However, you need to, again, register with the Ministry of Education. So the child needs to be registered with the
Yes.
Ministry of Education. And now would be the time to do that if you're thinking about it for September.
Right.
So you would need to, again, direct a letter to the Chief Education Officer stating your desire to homeschool your child. If you can give just a little bit of information about why you want to go that route.
Yes.
The age of your child, of course, the date of birth, and where they were born, and all of that sort of information. What curriculum you're looking at following, because that is important. It would
Yes.
need to be assessed to make sure that it is an adequate curriculum that is being followed. Qualifications of who is going to be instructing this child. And as I say that, I also want us to note that if you are homeschooling, but you're not the one that's doing it, so maybe
Yes.
you have an instructor that you're hiring someone to
Yes.
instruct your child. And that person is also providing homeschooling for more than just your child. So maybe 3 children, 4 children, 5 children coming from different homes. They need to also be registered with the ministry.
Yes.
And that is because that is now no longer just a homeschooling program. That actually becomes a private school.
Yes.
And so that needs to be registered. Okay? So those are the sorts of information we need to come in along with some other things. And so if you are interested, again, in homeschooling, I would suggest you contact the Ministry of Education as well, so we can provide you with all the details that you would need to provide. It is
Right.
a bit.
Yeah. So it's so important for us to speak a little bit about homeschooling, because right after this whole COVID lockdown, we had an influx of persons calling and applications coming in that wanted to be processed immediately. And it was a little bit hard for us to say it cannot happen that way, because the process is in place, and to be considered a home school officially, you have to go through that process. So according to the application process, according to our admissions policy, it should take about 3 months for us to get all the parts together.
At least. But again, it depends on how many entries persons you're having.
Yes.
Asking for this service.
Yes.
Because evaluations have to be done to
Yes.
make sure that it's in line and so forth. So we would ask you to give it a little bit more than 3.
Yes.
But at least at a minimum 3 months.
Okay. And also, I want to add something else to the homeschooling bit, Ms. McMaster. We do endeavor to understand and to know and to follow these children in their homeschooling. And so would they be required to send reports, or what do they have to do to keep us abreast of what's happening?
They have to register every year. So
Okay.
they still have to come back every school year stating that they intend to continue.
Yes.
They would need to provide information in terms of the children's assessment results. How did it work? Again, because we need to be able to evaluate if the homeschool services are really meeting the needs of the child developmentally where they are and everything is appropriate. So they would need to provide a report.
Yes.
They would need to provide in terms of what classes the child was doing, a schedule and so forth. Again, the results of the assessments that would have been done, and you need to make sure that the children are assessed
Yes.
regularly. Accordingly, they can also be asked to do the ministry's exams to make sure that they are on par
Yes.
with the other children within the territory and so forth. So again, it's not as simple as it sounds to say I just want to educate my child at school, at home. So there are things that you do have to provide and that you do
Yes.
need to seriously think about.
Yes, very, very good. Very, very good information, Ms. McMaster. And that information, we really want to be sure people are hearing that the homeschooling process, yes, it's permitted via the Ministry of Education, but we have a whole policy in place
Yes.
for homeschooling. It's not just haphazard, but it's in place. If we find that persons requested homeschool and then further down the road, we take our spot checks and our visits, and the child is not in school, what happens?
Okay, yes. So, as you said, there are spot checks because the program is monitored as well.
Yes.
We have to ensure that you're saying that the child is being educated. We have to ensure that that is happening. So that would be a part of the process, the
Yes.
spot checks. If those spot checks are done and it's found that the child is not where they should be
Yes.
in terms of the fact that
Yes.
maybe they're not actually attending classes, or something has gone wrong, or whatever the situation is, and you have not notified the ministry of whatever the circumstances or situation is, then the truancy unit is called in. Because again, it's a part of us ensuring that the children are being educated. And so this has implications. So first of all, the truancy would check to ensure what's going on. It might just be a slight thing that's happening at the moment.
Right.
And so it might just be to remind you that the children have to be in school, and so you need to ensure that you are meeting your agreements. If it's not getting anywhere, again, it could be reported to social development because this could also be construed as a situation of child neglect.
Yes.
And there is a mandatory requirement to report that in that case to ensure that we are not just letting our children fall by the wayside. And there are financial implications as well because there is a fee penalty
yes,
that's
definitely.
involved in that as well. And so
Yes.
we want persons to be mindful of those things. So it's not to be taken lightly, and we do not take homeschooling lightly either.
Okay, and ultimately, if the parent is not able to maintain the homeschooling and get the child in school and keep the child going to school, we can mandate that the child be placed in a structured
Yes.
classroom.
Yes.
In some, whether you want to do private or public, but
Yes.
we can mandate that will
Right.
happen.
So what we would suggest to parents is
yes.
if you are homeschooling and you're starting to recognize that you're having challenges, again, contact the ministry and let us know.
Yes, and then we can just recommend that you move on. So what happens if a parent keeps a child at home after they have turned the age of 5 and just decide, I'm not sending a child to school, I don't have any food, I don't have any uniform, I'm just not chilling. What happens here?
Okay, so again, like I said, it's a mandatory something. Once your child has gotten to the age of 5,
Yes.
they have to be in school. So if you are having challenges, whether because we have seen some situations like that, parents are saying, COVID, times are tough, I'm not working. So if I don't, for example, have food to provide, I will keep the child at home. Or I don't have the school clothes, I will keep the child at home. And what we're saying is, no, you can't do that.
Yes, yes,
There is a penalty involved for that kind of situation. There is assistance available.
yes.
So social development, again, would be the ones to contact in terms of if you're in need of
Yes.
some assistance because you are struggling. The social development department is there, and that is one of their roles to be able to provide some level of support. And some schools do have some things that embedded or attached to them to try to provide some level of assistance in cases like that as well. So
Yes.
if you are happen to be a parent who is struggling in that way, don't just keep the child at home. Contact the school. Let them know what some of your challenges might be and allow them to be able to help you to source some support and help.
All right. Thank you so much. A whole lot of good information, and I encourage the listening audience to take heed if you have children or you are making this step in terms of schooling and homeschooling. But let's talk about a child and the person who's considering a preschool. What suggestions would you have to give to a parent who is now ready to put their child in a preschool?
Okay. Now, with, again, the COVID situation, some parents' spaces have become limited because of the reduced numbers that they're able to accommodate.
Right.
So some persons have been taking their children to a neighbor or a friend or maybe even a family member to hold for them.
Yes.
And like we did say that it is not mandatory that the child be in preschool.
Yes.
However, if you are placing your child in somebody else's care, you want to ensure that that person is capable, is competent, and
Yes.
your child is receiving quality service
Yes.
and care. Okay? The individual needs to be registered with the Ministry of Education. So if they're looking at opening a center, I want to provide, and once I have more than 5 children, then I am actually running a center.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
that needs to be registered with the Ministry of Education. Again, there are financial implications if it's not. Okay. And it's an application process. So there's a form that you would need to fill out where you would need to put together your information about what kind of program you're offering,
Yes.
your hours, how many persons you're looking at providing this
Yes,
service
yes.
for. What are your qualifications that allow you to be able to provide this quality of service and so forth? And you're working with young children, so of course we would want to ensure that there's in your background. So we ask you to have a criminal record check with the police department just to confirm that there aren't any challenges or concerns that we would need to be careful or mindful of when it comes to dealing with children
Right.
and so forth. Again, that needs to be submitted to the ministry. So the certification along with the criminal record check from the police would need to be, along with the application form and all of your information, would need to be submitted to the education department again, and it goes to the chief education officer.
All right. Thank you so much for that information. So we are encouraging preschools, but we want you to do it right.
Yes.
And we want to be sure that they're on the books and people are you're official and legal.
Yes.
In what you're doing. If you're just helping out a neighbor for a period of time, that's okay. But if you have this on a consistent basis, I think I'm hearing you saying that it needs to be
It needs
registered.
to be, yes. And we really want to encourage parents to do that because, I mean, you're paying your money because I'm sure they're not holding them for free.
Right.
So if you are going to be paying your money, then you want to ensure that you're getting quality service.
Right.
And if anything happens to your child as well, you want to be sure that that is covered. If you are taking a chance and taking your child to someone that is not registered and something, unfortunately, God forbid, were to happen,
Yes.
again, you have no support. You
Okay.
understand? So you would want to encourage people to think about these types of things. And for the person who is looking at doing the center, again, it's in your own best interest as well to ensure that you are registered with the ministry.
All right, great. And so we have been doing some work in bridging the gap between the preschools and formal education when the child leaves preschool, when the child gets into kindergarten. We found that there was a disjoint or there was a break or a gap there. And we have been doing some work to help that. Ms. McMaster, I'm asking you a lot of questions, but that's fine, I'm sure.
Yes,
because we want to
of
get the
course.
information out
Yes,
there. We want people to
do.
know that lots of things are being done to ensure we have education system that is taking care of children as early as we can and going right up. Even though the children in the preschool and the daycare really has, the Ministry of Health has a great stake in their development, etc. We want education to also be in there. So we have the child who is getting ready to leave preschool and enter kindergarten. We have a few activities that are coming up this term. Talk to the audience about
Yes.
that. Let them know exactly what are some of the things we are trying to do to ensure the child is ready or has a little exposure, know where they're going? Talk
All
to
right.
me.
Yes, thank you so much for that question. And I'm
Yes.
really glad to have this opportunity to be able to promote it.
Yes.
This term we call it as our transition term.
Yes.
And that is because we ask our parents who are looking at or whose children will be entering kindergarten in particular
Yes.
in September to take their children through what we're calling a transition process because they have to make adjustments.
Yes.
And so the easier that is for them, the better.
Yes.
So the primary schools, so with kindergarten classes,
Yes.
are going to be hosting what we're calling an open day
Yes.
or an open house kind of situation, where they are going to be welcoming all parents who are interested in bringing their child to that institution in September to come in, have a brief meeting with the principal, the teacher, get to learn a little bit about the school, what the expectations are, see a little bit of what the school environment is like. Take your child with you again, and that is to help to start familiarizing your child with the environment. See how your child responds to the environment. Are they adjusting fairly quickly? So
Yes.
maybe they get in there and they let go of your hand and they start running around and so forth. So you know, okay, this is an environment where this child seems to be
It's comfortable.
comfortable.
Yes.
Or this is a child who is a little bit more withdrawn, and so that one visit may not be enough. They would want to have another opportunity to visit
Yes.
the school so that they can start to become comfortable with that environment.
Yes.
And that is starting as early as February 5th with some schools. And so we're going to try to put out the dates for for each school because we know that the children are coming from different places. So it's not to say that because you're at one preschool or that everybody's going to be going to this one
Same
center.
school, right.
So they may be in different places. So we're going to try to put out the dates once we have all the dates in for the schools when they're going to be having that open house.
Yes.
And we're really asking our parents to make an effort to try to take your child when that session is being offered. And it's not all day. It's only going to be for maybe 45 minutes, an hour at the most,
Yes.
where you get to go in. And again, because too with COVID and the protocols and trying to maintain the number of persons that are on campus at any given
Yes.
time and in
Yes.
interactions and so forth, we're doing it that way this year where we're scheduling a set date.
Right.
Before that, you could just call the school, but we're asking everybody to this time around, please to comply with the set date that is offered and to take advantage of the opportunity. If though that the date that is set doesn't quite work for you, again, contact the school and see if you can make alternate arrangements.
Yes.
But as much as possible, we're asking everyone to comply with the dates that will be set.
So while you're talking about taking a child to a school of their choice, I want Ms. Evans to tell us a little bit about the guidelines that we have in terms of where the child can be registered when they're going to school. We have one major guideline that we want to reiterate to all parents. That is, I want Ms. Evans to share with the listening audience.
Okay, so according to the Education Act that was put in place from 2004,
Yes.
students should be assigned to school by zoning. What that is, students ultimately should be going to school in their district.
Yes. Where they
So
live.
a student that resides in Greenland, for example, shouldn't be placed in a school in King Garden Bay or in Capoons Bay. They should be looking at Willard Wheatley because
Yes.
that's more of their district.
Francis. So that child could go either to Willard Wheatley
Or Francis
or to
Letson.
Francis Letson,
Yes.
because that is in the general
Correct.
area, and we do have
Yes.
2 schools on that side of the territory.
Yes.
We have had over the time, however, we have had those persons who have been saying, well, I work in town and I need my child to come with me in town. Why do you think, let the audience know why we are really reiterating that this year, and we have been for the last several years. Actually, we have been really reiterating it since Hurricane Irma.
Yes.
And that had a lot to do with what was happening at the time, and we felt that it was necessary to continue this. Tell us why.
Well, it was necessary. Well, for starters, it's in the Education Act. And then keeping in line with what's in the Education Act and what's in our policy, this is what it should have been.
Yes.
We should have never,
Been doing.
swayed from what was there.
Right. Okay. So we are trying our very best to uphold that.
Yes.
And we are asking that persons really assist us with this, and be honest with your process. Please be honest with your process, and not say you have heard that.
Special consideration might be given if there's a sibling and there's a younger child trying to,
Join.
Yes, special consideration, discretion might be given for situations like that. But ultimately, children are expected to attend school within their district.
Right, and so that could happen. Maybe you were living in Bellevue when your first child started to go to school,
Yes.
and now you're living in Horse Path.
Right.
So there will be the concession where we'll allow you to take the other child up to Bellevue because that's where the first child is enrolled. So we want to make that clear. I'm going to go back to Miss McMaster. And Miss McMaster, I want you to speak to the parents or speak to the listening audience whose child may have some special needs. And as we said earlier, we are educating every child. And for as long as I can tell you, we have been doing our best and improving over the years to facilitate the needs of children who have special conditions. So talk to us. If your child has a special needs condition, what would you say to them as their children enter school for the first time?
Okay. So the first thing I would say to them is that the transition process is most likely even more challenging for that child.
Yes.
As opposed to otherwise. And our desire is really to be able to help children to achieve their highest potential.
Right.
And so anything that may get in the way of that, we want to try to mitigate against.
Yes.
Within the public system,
Yes.
once you start kindergarten, within the school, we have what we call student support. And so within that student support system, you have the guidance counselors, for example, you have specialist teachers and so forth who are able to work with the children and provide any extras support that that child may need in terms of helping them settle, in terms of just helping them developmentally or whatever the challenges may be. We have been noticing more and more, fortunately or unfortunately, that we're finding
Yes.
that we're having more children who seem to be having a bit of challenges,
Wow.
particularly in the needs in the area of speech.
Right.
These issues can be minimized in a sense if the earlier we deal with them.
Yes. Early
So-
detection.
Right. So it may be a case of maybe at some point something got stuck in the child's ear while they were younger.
Yes.
That may have gone unnoticed and it impacted their hearing,
Yes.
which would have had implications for their speech development and so forth. So having these things be able to come to light, we can then intervene earlier, because the earlier we can intervene, the better for the child.
Yes.
So if you have concerns or that there may be some things about your child you're concerned about, whether you know for sure or you're not sure.
Yes.
The best thing to do would be to start the conversations early.
Yes.
So when you go to the transition visits, and hopefully you will be going to the transition visits, have a conversation with the principal around
Yes.
some of these concerns. I have a child who seems to be a little bit behind of other children their age in terms of their speech development. Or socially, the way they engage with other children,
Yes.
I'm having some concerns here as well.
Yes.
So that person, the principal or the administration of the school, begins to start thinking, how can we start to put measures in place to assist this child as soon as possible,
Right.
so that the child is not losing out.
Yes. Okay,
Okay.
so we want to be sure that parents, you're hearing if you have a special needs child and with special conditions, that we also want to cater. So we need to get the necessary information. And finally, Ms. McMaster, I want to ask you, we just spoke about the special needs, but are there any general guidelines for the person who's just any parent who's bringing their child to school in a formal setting, as in the kindergarten classes, for the first time?
Yes. Well, as we said, we want them to remember to do the transition visits, because you want to smooth your child into the
Yes.
process. See how they're reacting to the environment, and that will allow you to be able to figure out if you need to take them into the environments a couple times more than just having them show up on the first day of school.
Right.
That's one. 2, once you've received your notification from the ministry that your child has been confirmed with a place at a particular school, contact that school's principal to let them know that you have received correspondence and this is where their child will be coming. They may have some additional information that they need to give you in preparation for school in September.
Yes.
So you can get that information early. Like we said, if any special concerns that you have in relation to your child, communicate that again with the school administration as soon as possible. And if you have any other concerns, communicate it to the ministry as well. So again, if you feel that your child is not quite at the cutoff date in terms of age, contact the ministry so that we can work on the check to see what's going on there. Or if you have concerns that your child is not ready as yet as well, we want you to contact the ministry so that, again, the ministry can take the necessary steps to try to ensure that that child is not being left behind. Or
definitely.
Okay?
Definitely.
And so forth.
So we are talking about the child getting into the kindergarten, but I'm going to go back to Miss Evans, and I'm going to ask Miss Evans to tell the audience, how will they know about the approval process? How will they know that the child has been approved to attend school and which school they have been approved to attend? Ms. Evans.
So after each application has been, we go over each application and it has been approved and each child has been placed, the parents are issued a letter, an official letter from the Ministry of Education stating what school the child has been placed at. They will be contacted to collect this letter so they can have it in their possession for their records.
All right. So therefore, an official correspondence should be received from every parent who's putting their child in our school system, whether public or private. And I like to always say whether public or private, because we want to be sure that every child in our school is legally in a school, in our system, and we are aware because of unnecessary documentation. So there was so much shared this afternoon when it came to our admissions policies, when it came to registration, early childhood, getting centers up and going, and all the information that is, in essence, projecting into 2021-2022 school year. And I trust that person's learned some things. I'm sure you may have heard some information for the first time. Some of it might have been just reminders for some persons. Some of it might have been in need of further explanation. Feel free to make contact with us if you have a question, you didn't quite understand certain things, or you missed a step in some part of the process, because we want this year to be record excellent. We want this year to be a record year where we can say our registration process was on point, because we have shared all this information with you. So I want you to really get in touch with us if you're in need of any further explanation for any section at all. You know, there might be somebody who wants to open up a daycare, who wants to open up a new center. Could anybody share with us any kind of requirements for that process? Ms. McMaster, maybe you can tell us if there's a person who's been thinking about opening a daycare. So they have gone and they have sent in their trade license request to the Ministry of Trade. And many times they go and they think that that's it. But if it's in relation to education, tell us what has to happen, Ms. McMaster.
If it's in relation to education, Trade will send you back to education, because education needs to have reviewed and ensure that that is fine and given, in a sense, permission for the person to be able to provide those types of services. We are going to take into consideration what your qualifications are, and it would, of course, be preferable if you are looking at a preschool that you have some level of training in early childhood development or early childhood education. Okay? If it's a daycare, it is, as you said, more in terms of health. However, again, it comes through the education department for registry. We would need to take a look at where you are looking at placing your center. Safety is very important, and so we want persons to think about where they are locating their centers, that it is relatively safe for children to be, for young children to be, young active children to be.
Yes, definitely.
And of course, it needs to ensure that all the developmental needs of the child are going to be provided for. So their social emotional development, their physical development, their communication skills, some spiritual development, their math, and in terms of becoming aware of the scientific information and the understanding the world around them and so forth. So we want to ensure that the children are going to be provided
Yes.
with opportunities that are going to help them to be well-rounded
Yes.
and prepare them efficiently and
Yes.
effectively
Yes.
for the world that they're going to be a part, that they are already a part of.
All right. So the last time I checked, we had about 32 active preschools or daycares and
Combinations, daycare
preschools
yes.
in the territory already. And so it might seem like that's a lot, but there's still more room for other persons who may have the desire to take care of children and give into the lives of the children in this way. But we have some excellent daycare preschools out there already. If you're in search, you can, do some research and find out the one that will best suit your child. We want to put that out there and to give a plug for the daycare and preschools that we have in operation. Kudos to many of them. They're doing an excellent job. And we want any additional children that are coming to choose and to get into the best schools.
Yes.
So we are bringing this to a close, and I'm going to ask each of you to just give us a closing comment as we wrap up this afternoon's chat with the community. I do want to thank you both for wanting to come and agreeing to be here today and to share this information. Sometimes we keep quiet on what we are doing and people are not aware and information is not out there. So this is going to be out there this year, and persons can always go back and replay and to listen to all the steps that we have given them. So I'm going to start with Ms. Evans to just give some closing words and encouragement to those who are listening.
I just want to mention again that registration is ongoing. Persons should visit the Ministry of Education or access the form online on the government's website, bvi.gov.vg. Please get the children registered early. Meet the deadline of April 30th so we could help get a speedy response back out to you.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Evans, for being here. I certainly appreciate you and appreciate you coming. Ms. McMaster.
Yes, I thank you very much, Mrs. George, for having me. It was indeed a pleasure as well to be here and to share some information that I hope will be of benefit, especially to our young children within the territory. To remind them to please, I really want to encourage you to make the best use of the transition visits. Some you may have two schools within your district. Your child may be more comfortable in one as opposed to the other, and so forth. And again, always think in terms of you want an environment that's best suited to your individual child's needs. So take this opportunity and make the most of it as much as you can. And if you have any questions, we are welcoming you, any opportunity to chat further with you, to share any further information that may be desirable to help parents to understand. Don't
Yes.
take for granted the early years. They are very key, critical years in our development as individuals.
And I would have to add maybe the most important years
Thank you very
in
much,
how
Mrs. George.
a child or a person is going to grow and to
Yes.
matriculate as they journey through their personal lives. The beginning is
Yes.
absolutely important. So in my hand, I have a copy of our admissions policy, and I want to just reiterate that definitely we are looking forward to having a smooth process this year with all the information that we have shared and being guided by what we have documented as we develop and we move forward towards 2021-2022 school year. It promises to be a great year. Even from January, I'm saying that, the words you speak are powerful. So I'm going to speak those words into the atmosphere that 2021-2022 school year is going to be a great year. Looking forward to the other adjustments that will come. But we definitely are making plans for the new school year. By way of announcements, I just want to remind parents that Friday, February 12th is going to be our midterm break. And the day before, the 12th, which is going to be the 11th, is our professional development day for our staff in the Ministry of Education. And we are going to be So the students will have that particular day off as well as midterm break. But it is so important. Any growing, vibrant, moving education system will always take the time to ensure that teachers are kept on the cutting edge of what's happening in education. And we want to use one day a year, one day every term, I should say, as our professional development day. So we may not be having contact with the children, but we are sharpening the skills of our teachers so that they can be even more effective in the classroom. So it's going to be Friday, February 11th. It's going to be our midterm break. And then Thursday, February 11th will be our professional day. So that's 2 days back to back. And then I want to also mix 6 schools across the territory expecting to compete in the ministry's education annual inter-secondary school debates. And they will begin next week. That is a week I'm looking forward to. It has become quite a very good event to sit and listen to the young people discuss and debate current events. The schools participating in this year's debates will be Brigada Flax Educational Center, Secondary Division, Cedar International School, Siboney Center of Excellence, Claudia Creaky Educational Center, Elmore Stout High School, and Virgin Islands School of Technical Studies. We are making an adjustment to the timing, but we will make these programs available on Facebook, on JTV station, and so on, so that we can be sure the listening audience or the public will hear, because we are in this COVID era looking at the best ways, and so we're going to be running the sessions during the day this year, but the sessions will be recorded and available for viewing in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, I do thank you. My name is Connie George, Chief Education Officer in the Ministry of Education, where we keep moving, things are happening, something new is always happening in education. There's never a dull moment. Those are the words that I hear all the time. There's never a dull moment in education. Once you're in education, you're moving. I definitely want to say thanks to the Minister of Education, Dr. the Honorable Natalia Wheatley, our Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Mrs. Caroline Stout-Igwe, and all the staff that work so hard all the time to ensure that education is moving. And it is so important. Not only I have my principals on the front line, my teachers on the front line, my counselors, and all those who take care of the environment in the schools. They're all very, very important, and I say thank you so much. Inside the office, we can't do it without them. We have them at every level taking care of things in the Ministry of Education, and I do thank all of you for your time, for giving unselfishly many times to ensure that our programs can keep running. Education work by dates, and we have to keep those dates going, and we have to be on time with all the dates. And so I need hands and I need hearts involved in all of this. I do thank you. As we bring today's chat with the community to a close, our topic today was on registration, and we look forward to our 2021-2022 school year. Do have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon.